Hey folks, this is Kalani. Alrighty, here we go. The big one. Blizzard has unveiled their master plan for Shadow Priests, and it's available to test on the alpha. This is the one we've been waiting for. Can Blizzard save Shadow Priest from itself? There are two major changes here, the return of Devouring Plague, and then a big boost to Shadow Word Death. I want to talk about what these changes do, what they don't do, and where Shadow Priest currently stands on the alpha. Before we jump in, be sure to pop by our live stream sometime over at twitch.tv/KalaniTV. We stream every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday at 12 PM PST, and we always love chatting with you wonderful folks, so I hope to see you soon. Okay, Devouring Plague first. We've seen a few iterations of this ability in history, so without actually being able to play with it, saying Devouring Plague is coming back wasn't all too useful. The early data mining on this ability also didn't look too promising, but now we actually have it on the alpha to test. Devouring Plague costs 50 insanity, so it is an insanity spender, affects the target with a disease that instantly causes shadow damage and deals additional shadow damage over 12 seconds. Damage caused by the Devouring Plague heals the caster. So, Devouring Plague is a new Insanity Spender, which is the first we've seen except for Void Form, which means it automatically competes with Void Eruption and Void Form. The general idea for Devouring Plague was apparently to provide you with a different option to spend your Insanity on. This was meant to be better in burst situations, either when you're out in the world and you won't benefit from a long Void Form duration, or when you're facing a group of monsters that die too quickly in a dungeon for Void Form to really ramp up. I can tell you right now, it doesn't do either of those things. Being useful in the open world comes down to burst. It's plain and simple. You want to kill your targets as quickly as possible so you can move on to the next one. That's what questing is all about. Devouring Plague has two issues with burst. The first is that you can't really burst with Devouring Plague because it costs 50 insanity. You have to build insanity to gain access to another damage over time effect, so it's actually kind of adding to your ramp more than it is to your burst, which won't help too much when you're questing or doing world quests. The second problem is quite simply the damage. It just doesn't deal anywhere near enough damage to start competing with Void Form. Void Form gives you some very strong burst DPS with Void Eruption. It increases your throughput by giving you access to Void Bolt, a shorter cooldown on Mind Blast, increased spell damage, and the increased haste. That's without adding on any other bonuses that might pop up for Void Form to replace Azerite traits going into Shadowlands. So not only does Devouring Plague fall flat as a burst spell, it also loses out entirely on prolonged engagements because that's not what it's designed for. The other supposed use of Devouring Plague was for groups of monsters that die too quickly for Void Form to really get going. The same problems apply. You have to generate 50 insanity per target you want to cast Devouring Plague on. That's going to take you quite a while. There's no burst there, that's multi-target ramp, and if you really want to burst, Void Eruption hits all enemies near your target for more damage than the Devouring Plagues would do over their entire duration anyway. Having the ability cost insanity isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it automatically hamstrings the burst potential, which is what the spell was apparently added for. You also can't stack Devouring Plagues on a target. If you reapply Devouring Plague, it doesn't add any significant duration. It caps out at 14 seconds right now. That's 2 seconds longer than a single application, and it doesn't stack the damage at all. So even if you save up 100 insanity to double Devouring Plague, it doesn't increase your burst damage on a single target. If you Devouring Plague 2 targets, that could work better, but Void Eruption still deals more damage, so Void Form still wins in the burst category, just in this instance you would Void Form and maybe a Devouring Plague, if you use Devouring Plague at all. So it can't really burst, it's not useful on groups of monsters that die too quickly, and to top it off, it's directly competing with Void Form. You have to choose between delaying Void Form or casting a Devouring Plague. Right now, Void Form wins 10 times out of 10, so there's no place for Devouring Plague in the rotation. I know some of you may be thinking that you can cast Devouring Plague in Void Form to get some extra damage out of it, and you can. That might actually be something of a burst option, except you reduce reduce your max void form duration every time you cast Devouring Plague. Losing 50 insanity can kick you out of void form very quickly, depending on how much insanity you are currently generating, and even if you can stay in void form, casting Devouring Plague will always reduce your max uptime, which could impact other factors like gaining stacks of void form to deal damage for longer periods of time. So alright Kalani, it seems like the main problem here is damage. So if they just give it a good bump up, we should be fine, right? Maybe. Devouring Plague needs to deal more damage, it just can't compete with Void Form otherwise, but then you start to run into other issues. If Devouring Plague deals enough damage to be better than Void Form, when do you start using Void Form again? I think Devouring Plague outright replacing Void Form could work out better for Shadow Priest overall, but I think you have to pick. If Devouring Plague is better, you won't use Void Form. If Void Form is better, you won't use Devouring Plague. There will be some overlap here where if the fight lasts longer than 50 seconds or 70 seconds or whatever it might be, then Void Form would be better, and if it's shorter than that, then Devouring Plague would be better, but that overcomplicates the spec and doesn't really give you anything for all of the trouble. I don't think Devouring Plague works as an insanity spender, while Void Form is still in the game. Pick one or the other and focus on making it work. More damage would make Devouring Plague better, but it's still going to feel bad to play with. If you want Devouring Plague to beat Void Form, just get rid of Void Form, please. As it currently stands, Devouring Plague does nothing to change how a Shadow Priest plays, it's a completely worthless ability. Adding in a single ability also doesn't address the actual problems of the spec, which makes me think this is more of a token gesture at best. I would love to see more iteration on Shadow Priest, and I really hope this isn't everything we're going to see. Let's talk about the other change. Shadow Word Death has been beefed up quite a bit. It will now deal 100% additional damage to targets below 20% health, so it's been made into a proper execute and will likely be a high priority spell on any target that gets below that 20% health threshold. The first awesome use of this is Burst, to finish off a target very quickly when it dips below execute range. A Shadow Word Death kills almost any outdoor mob below 20% health right now, especially if it crits, so it definitely does its job as an execute and as a burst ability. The second use is going to be as a damage increase in execute range on longer boss fights. Just because you'll be hitting yourself for the damage you deal, that's not going to deter most Shadow Priests from dealing that extra execute damage when they can. What is interesting is that Shadow Word Death does not generate insanity in Shadowlands right now, so you will lose one global cooldown of insanity generation to make use of that extra damage, which might actually be too much. Losing a single global in your rotation every 17 seconds can reduce the overall void form duration quite significantly, so that's going to be a question for the simulations to figure out. But for outdoor content, or for any type of content where you have ads or monsters that are dying quickly and often, the huge damage boost on an executing Shadow Word Death is fun to play with and it actually works, so at least that change brings something to the table. And that's it. That's what Shadow Priests have to work with so far. It's definitely not a lot, and it's for sure not enough. The dev team needs to have a hard, long think about what they want Shadow Priest to look like, because these changes tell me they really just don't know, and if they don't know how they want Shadow Priest to play, they're just going to keep stabbing in the dark. This stab missed the mark. But that's all we have to talk about for Shadow Priest changes that we've seen so far on the alpha at least, and how they actually change Shadow Priest, which isn't really that much. Keep your fingers crossed that this isn't their grand solution, but what do you think of these changes from what we've seen so far? How would you fix Shadow Priest so it's both enjoyable to play and competitive when it comes to dealing damage? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. If you want to explore the alpha or run a couple dungeons with us, you can find us over at twitch.tv/KalaniTV. We stream every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday at 12 PM PST, and watching the stream and coming to say hi is one of the best ways you can support the channel right now. And if you ever wanted to be included in the long list of names at the end of every video, a subscription on Twitch is the easiest way to make that happen. You get a free sub to any Twitch channel if you have Amazon Prime too, so be sure to take advantage of that. A big thank you to everyone who has subscribed on Twitch already, and to our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, well, now you know how. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.